Okay, I think we're restarting, so if people want to hear Will and I talk about GMing, this would be the time you get to hear that. Because I did a Q&A, it turned into a Q&A about GMing, because all Q&As done by game designers turn into Q&As about GMing. I suspect all QAs done in front of gamers turn into QAs about GMing. I hope to live long enough to see people ask, some guy who's there because they were on Star Trek about GMing. Then I think we'll have really won.
That's what we can probably ask.
Yeah, we could ask him. That would be an excellent sort of wedge into the system, right? The camel's nose in the door, because he'd probably answer it, and then we'd
he definitely would answer.
Ms. Muldar, Will Wheaton answered that question, and now we win. Although don't be mean to Diana Muldar, she had to put up a silence.
Yeah.
Be mean to who?
From Star Trek?
Yeah.
I'm going to say, just based off of his appearance in Community, I'd say LeVar Burton, because he'd roll with it.
Yeah.
He'd play along with you.
That's not really that mean.
No, but you don't want to be, I don't want to be mean to any of you.
All right, fair enough. Okay, this is Will Hindmarch, in case you weren't here last time. Will is a magnificent game designer in both traditional and indie spaces. He thinks more about narrative more intelligently than I do. In my general career of being next to people who are better at stuff than me and then reflecting them on me, Will is a crucial node in that network. He is the author of Project Dark, which is the first stealth tabletop role-playing game, pretty much. First designed from the ground up to be a stealth tabletop role-playing game. The designer of Odyssey, the game of changing during story, which is around here even now. I'm sure there are still 1 or 2 copies left to be sold, yes?
I don't know.
I'm sure there are.
Back there still.
And was also the developer of Vampire in its, I guess, last printed incarnation, right?
Somebody might pick on me if I say yes, just because there were things after that in print. But yeah, I was on Requiem during the change to the World of Darkness.
And also it's apparently been sold, but is also the co-author of Eternal Lies, which is the great, magnificent, globe-trotting, world-spanning, character-destroying, life-ending campaign for Trail of Cthulhu. Our Masks of Nyarlathotep, if you will, provided by the lovely and talented Will Hindmarch, who with his partner Jeff Tidball runs Game Playwright, Jeff also the co-author of Eternal Lies, and published Hamlet's Hit Points, and then also published anthologies edited, I guess, by you, The Bones, and Things We Think About Games, right? And in which I am in Things We Think About Games once, and in The Bones twice. So The Bones is twice as good. So that's Will, if you missed him.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
And no one missed me. So.
You guys remember Ken from like 10 minutes ago, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Previously.
Previously on this room.
I have short-term memory. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, Ken Hite, you want me to introduce him?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Ken Hite. We did actually get the people. So.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I just don't think that we need to deal with that. Oh, but I should mention that I do a podcast with Robin Laws called Ken and Robin Talk About Stuff. Again, in the broad category of sitting very near someone who is really, really good at stuff and sort of shining in their reflected glory.
Robin's amazing.
Robin's so great. So this is going to be about GMing on purpose as opposed to GMing accidentally, like all panels turn into.
Wait, this is going to on purpose be about GMing.
Right.
Yes.
And also, ideally, be about GMing on purpose.
Yes.
And Will, you almost certainly have more prepared and more useful thoughts than I do. Do you want to do a little, what the hell's wrong with you kids, talk before we do the Q&A, or just jump into Q&A?
I think the only thing I wanted to cover, and we covered, for those of you who were here during the my talk at the beginning, I did a little bit of this, which is just to make sure that I have a sense as to how fast, how far the room wants us to travel. So
right.
just so I'm clear, like how many of us have played an RPG before in any capacity, right? Cool, awesome, I figured. Now how many of us have GM'd before in any capacity? How many of us are regular GMs for our groups? Okay, cool. Still great results. But just so I know, for example, there's a fair amount of jargon that I know either one of us is going to use. Do not hesitate to put your hand in the air and tell us, I don't know what that is. Because also Ken and I have jargon sometimes that is only jargon between us.
Yes. You know how twins develop their own language? It's kind of like that. The doctors are hoping to separate us anytime.
Do you hear that? Ken is thirsty. Can you all hear that?
Yeah.
We can move straight into Q&A. If I see hands go up right now, we're just going to start the Q&A. If people want me to break ice, I will break some ice. We have a question. The bidding starts at 100. Quad lose. You're fine.
My question mainly deals with combat. I've been DMing for about 10, 11 years by this point. But the one thing I always get sort of hooked up on is when my players want, like there'll be some players in the group who want very tactical turn-based combat, and there will be some players who are so into the roleplay aspect of the game that they want me to go into sort of narrative combat and not use initiative. Is there any advice you can give on how to sort of marry narrative combat and like cinematic combat with tactical combat?
You have a gut reaction? I have a couple of things.
I mean, my gut reaction is that by and large, this is one form of the question that half of all GMing questions is the one question. Let's get this one out of the way. Put a pin in yours. We're going to get right back to it. The most common question that we used to get is, I have this one player who does everything wrong and is a jackass and throws dice and watches porn during the game and licks all the popcorn and wants to play Traveler when everyone else is playing Fate. And what do I do about that guy? And the answer is, don't invite that guy to play with you. Fire him. If you go to the movies with the same people and one of your friends always talks during the movies, you don't invite him to movie night. If one of your friends smells like bear chow, you don't invite him hunting. It's just the way we do everything else, do that. So if you had the question of, what do I do about that one guy? Fire him. He's not worth it. It's a social activity, it's a group activity, play with the group. Now this is my group is at war with each other over tiny matters of protocol question, which we also get a lot of. And my instinct is, again, like it was with the Jedi question, to vary it. So some fights are going to be best handled as narrative or cinematic fights. And you'll say, you do your signature move, you do a thing, and the bad guys fall like 9 pins, and maybe there's a flurry of blows, and ideally the flurry of blows will be between the guy who enjoys tactics and a bad guy, but it might not be. And then you do that, and we're done and we're moving. But there's going to be a big fight where the dice come out and the miniatures are all laid out and everyone has to count off their initiative in segments, and we're going to play it straight down the line by the rules. And as long as everyone understands that they get their cookie during the game, they should be mature enough to understand that not everything is always going to be their way in a group activity. And I think you can do that, especially with fights, because fights by their nature have to change up or else they get too samey. So the fact that you are forced to run some fights fast and loose and some fights strong and sturdy is actually a benefit because it lets you change up your fights. And as long as you get the tactical people to pipe down during the cinematic fights and the cinema people to withhold their yawning during the tactical fights, then I think everyone's a winner. And maybe the cinematic guys will notice something in the tactics that's kind of interesting. They're like, I didn't know you got a +3 bonus from attacking from the above quadrant. I'm going to think about how I can do that. And maybe the tactical guy will notice something in the cinematic fight that's like, wow, we got to do literally anything else this game. That's awesome. So hopefully everyone can, sort of recognize that we are all at the table together to do the same thing, not to do 2 separate hobbies. Right. And, again, if that doesn't work, then you can ask them to, what's wrong with you guys?
I ended up having to split one large group of 14 players into...
Yeah, you should do that anyway. I'm sorry. You didn't begin with the part where we're gaming in a bear trap.
I ended up splitting it into 2 groups.
Yes, that's probably one.
2 groups of 7?
No, one group of 9.
7 still sounds like a lot to me.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it is a lot of players. The problem is I get a lot of people who want to join my games, and I have a problem saying no.
Well, look at this guy. Look how awesome. And he's obviously willing to run tactical.
Right.
That's a pearl above rubies.
As an example of a kind of boots in the ground example of how I would answer that question, there are 3 immediate actionable tactics that I would use in addition to splitting the group into smaller groups.
To 5 smaller groups.
And this is I'm not going to count the obvious, which is cloning yourself. So what we do
I've
is...
tried, it doesn't work.
Right? It never, that guy always turns out kind of a jerk.
I had to
You kill him.
Multiplicity, yeah.
Are you the
Over
clone or
and
the
over.
other guy?
No comment.
Fair enough. So, thank you. And because I probably don't want to get involved in that. So there's one of them is what kind of initiative system you're using can make a big impact on whether or not people want initiative to be present at all. For example, if you have it that initiative is just done by team, and so the players go and then the bad guys go, or the bad guys go and then the players go, that helps cinematic play emerge from tactical style of play, sometimes just because they can feel more tactical in the cinematic mode because they're arranging how they interact with each other better. And they can say, well, I'll go, then you move, then I move, then you go, and they can do all kinds of crazy stuff, and it doesn't actually change how many actions are taken in little clusters and stuff. So you can kind of blur the line between what is cinematic and what is tactical, to try to help people feel like they're not doing favors for each other when really they are. The other thing, and then in that same category is the what is sometimes happily but unhappily called popcorn initiative, which is the one where a player goes and then that player decides who goes next. And so the players still have a tactical element, which you Ken goes, and then Ken says, next I'm going to have Ann go, and then Roger will go. Or Ann would decide who goes next. And Ann says, Roger, you go next.
And sometimes, Anne's going to say, I think that the enemy sorcerer should go because I don't want him to.
Right, because I don't want them all to go at the end, and we're going to have
Right.
no ability to react.
To
So
fight back, yeah.
so once he goes and uses up a spell, then Roger, you close and kill him.
Right.
Yeah, that kind of a popcorn initiative it is sometimes called. Yeah, it's in things like the Marvel Heroic role-playing game. My digital release Always Never Now uses it. There are a bunch of there are versions of Fate that in which it's recommended or offered for sure, and it's a great little system because it adds what is a tactical layer that actually streamlines the game, and there are very few occasions where tactics
Actually make things
faster.
faster.
faster and feel like the players are more in control because they are.
Was that Cam Banks's?
As I understand, the provenance of the system is, when you ask Cam, is that he credits it to Lenny Balsera. But
Okay,
yeah,
to Leonard, okay.
yeah,
So it's Lenny.
yeah.
Okay.
But so that's changing the initiative system is one thing. The next thing we do is to telegraph whether or not you're doing cinematic or tactical combat before the combat. So if you have one of those things like, look, if you guys break into the castle, this outer ward is cinematic combat and this room is tactical. Don't always do that necessarily, but that's an option you have. So they can plan and say, well, we don't want to spend 3 hours in there. So let's arrange to do it without doing tactical combat in this mission. Or you could even say, if you guys are going to storm the castle, there's going to be one cinematic and one tactical combat. You tell me which is which. And then they can decide what they want to drill into, what they don't. And that helps set the table a little bit.
I usually save cinematic at this point for mass combat.
Yeah, always. I mean, always a great option too. But yeah.
Again, who's got a solid week to run a combat anymore?
Right.
And then systems will offer advantages to or easier ways or ways that are more convenient to you
Right.
to run combat. So the mass combat system in Savage Worlds is a little clunky, but it's robust.
Yeah.
Right? And so maybe you want to just sort of adapt the Savage Worlds mass combat system to your D&D game or to your Knights Black Agents game or whatever you're running because you're like, well, we don't really have that works good enough. We'll use it for that, and then we'll pull it through. And so you can say, oh, I like the initiative there, where once you've calculated initiative, everyone always goes on the same turn as they started with, even though the rules say you're supposed to recalculate every round. That slows things down, and we don't mind giving up this little bit of realism for a great advantage of speed. And so you can sort of monkey with the nitrous mix there to get exactly the kind of funny card you want.
Yeah. In which case, I would just say to make sure that, or not, you can't make sure in this case, but you can go a long way to making the players excited for that exploration and that tinkering, rather than them never knowing. So wait, this time I have to relearn a different combat system because we're mixing up initiative. When really it's not a big deal, because you can say like, cool, this fight is a unique situation, so we're doing initiative this way for this fight, and so make it an exciting thing, even though it might, even if you're trying something that is might be a degree more of a chore for you, right? I wouldn't let on just because it's worth hopefully what you're going to pick up on the other end for streamlining and being able to play together. So, yeah.
Thank you.
That guy.
I run an Edge of the Empire-ish game. It's basically like all 3 sets of rules combined, so they can make any kind of character that they want. And I have been running into the issue where minions, no matter how many I throw at them, minions go down one shot, which is
That's the
technically
point
what
of
they're
minions,
supposed
yeah.
what they're supposed to be. But if I've thrown 10 or 15 minions at these guys, and the combat's lasted 15 minutes. Okay, so I wanted to make it actually
Stop bragging.
expand. No, I wanted to expand it, make it more cinematic by having.
Well, a cinematic combat only does last 15 minutes.
Yeah, but that's not what I mean. I mean, like, make it a little bit more cinematic by adding outside elements. Like, you have the hacker in the group has to keep this open and
Right.
that sort of stuff.
Right, yeah.
Okay, and the problem with that was that if I didn't immediately go into initiative, I have a player who is annoyingly lucky.
Oh.
So, like, for instance, I had a rival who I had bolstered, okay, that had a lot of presence, a lot of ability to shirk off, like, fear kinds of attacks and so forth. And the guy rolled like 3 triumphs, and I'm sitting there going, you know?
Right, right.
Well,
So
I mean, that's
how
why
do-
we
how
that's
do
why
I
we have
combat
dice.
this?
I mean, that's why we have dice, right?
Yes.
Is sometimes they don't roll the way we want them to roll as GM or as player.
Yeah.
How do you combat that? I mean, if he's always lucky, I would
Yes.
say search him before the game. If
Touch
he
his dice.
just seems to be luckier, or even if he's a third luckier than other players, you know, eventually, you know, they've only got to get lucky once. He's got to be lucky every time, you know, and make it an in-game thing, right? He beat that rival guy, and so the rival guy is like, with my last breath, I broadcast the name of my killer to all the dark side. And so now everyone's like, oh, if we can kill that guy, we can drink his luck power. And, you know, make that a thing, right?
Vader will promote
Yeah,
us.
so Lord Snoke will promote us. And so make that part of the story. If it keeps happening, make it part of the story. And if he starts, you know, actually does roll badly, it's like, it's working. You know, eventually just, you know, I ran Call of Cthulhu, so there was, for 7 years, there was no possible way that a combat could end well unless I deliberately made sure it ended well. So it's like, oh no, the 5 of them are actually able to beat up a deep one. Well, now there's 3 deep ones. Well, that solved that problem. I would say just keep going with the rivals, right? I mean, he beat them. That means that in the universe of your game, they think he's a bigger threat, right? It's like the brave little tailor. They, you know, the giants are all like, oh, 7 with 1 blow. He must be the worst guy in the world. Curb stomp him. He's like, no, I meant flies. Oh, too late. And so, you know, Lucky Jedi there is now a marked man. People are like, we got to kill him. He's a great warrior for the light side.
We send guys with like headsets and visors on. Do not listen to this guy.
Yeah.
Right. You don't.
Yeah.
Like, cause maybe they do or don't understand how he works. Right. But the point being that, yeah, word gets out, and so now they're like, hey, he scared our toughest guy. So we've got to go in there with people like bolstered by the Force to not know fear at all,
Yeah.
to hunt him down, and that's a very, I mean, obviously fictional way to do it. But the other thing, to me, in that same category is once you've got, first of all, the more often you roll the dice, the less lucky anybody is. But it's also how much of these fights about killing stormtroopers, and how much of these fights about, like you say, keeping the door open so these people can escape, or because that's the other thing I would do is make the fights less about how fast can we kill stormtroopers. But make it clear that there's a Star Destroyer full of stormtroopers. We're just going to be killing stormtroopers until we can get the ship to take off, right? In which case, part of the question is, well, then let's get the ship to take off, right? Because we're not getting 25 XP per stormtrooper or something, so let's just, you know, don't let them game that system. But is to say, what the question is, the roles that are at stake are not, can we kill all these stormtroopers, but can we kill all these stormtroopers before they blow up Alderaan? Or can we kill all these stormtroopers before the TIE fighters find out where the Ewoks are hiding, or whatever it is? And so, that, among other things, gives different die rolls to happen, and gives different skills a chance to flex, and gives the players a chance to do things, even though the combat's ending rapidly while the guys with the lightsabers and the quick draw blasters are killing everybody. It helps create the situation where, even though, because I think the part of the situation is that a 15-minute combat can be great and very cinematic, but if it ends before the players get a chance to start using any of their cool stuff, that's where they feel like, well, every time we fight, Han Solo kills all the stormtroopers and Luke never gets to do anything, because this is the first Star Wars movie. And so, and if that's the case, then that's where you raise different questions. You say, not how long does it take, or can we kill all these stormtroopers? I'm trying to think. There's a great example in Star Wars. For example, the question isn't, are we going to get back to the Millennium Falcon, right? They're going to, because we don't have a map of the Death Star in that movie. Because if we did, it would be a Death Star crawl, and we'd be doing that for 4 weeks. So instead, it's just you'll be at the Death Star 2 scenes from now. We need a scene in between. You're going to have to fight
At
the
the Millennium
stormtroopers, and then you'll be at the Millennium Falcon. The question is, can Obi-Wan get the tractor beam out of commission, or else otherwise it doesn't matter, right? And in a situation like that in Star Wars, you said, well, Obi-Wan could just start fighting stormtroopers, but that's literally going to be all he's going to be able to do for the rest of the movie then, because it's a Death Star full of stormtroopers. So yeah, I would question how many combat scenes you're doing either are about combat or should be, how many you can substitute with essentially adventure sequences as opposed to combats per se, which I know is absolutely also just a feature of the dice mechanics in Edge of the Empire and its siblings, is that they will support you when you do this, because the system is so nice at complicating itself that if you can come up with more and more situations like this, and I think the adventures are pretty well designed to be able to be pulled apart and stuff if you're looking for ideas, but so that you can create these circumstances that will reward both the lucky and the unlucky players over time. And so that's where I would say just start immediately mixing up the combat so that eventually when this guy's luck starts running out, it'll have more dramatic weight, like Ken says, because it'll be part of the story.
Cool. Yeah.
In Star Wars and in a few other games, they have like the mechanic where succeed, and in that case with what are the bad banes or whatever the bad things are. It's like you succeeded
Succeed at a cost.
at a cost. And there's
Yeah,
a few other
right.
games where it's like they succeed. If they roll this, they succeed at a cost.
Right.
I find it difficult sometimes we come up with, that, or even in Star Wars, it's like you fail, but you get a whole bunch of
Right.
cool stuff. It's like how do I make failing awesome? Like
Yeah.
how does that help a player out?
Right.
I think that the best way that you can do it is just have, make a list sometime when you're not doing anything else. Get your GM's notebook out and write down a bunch of things that you can think of that might be benefits. You uncover a clue. Someone is impressed by you. Your ancestral lightsaber becomes more. It shines brighter blue. Whatever it is, you just come up with a zillion
Right.
benefits and a zillion bad things, and then in the moment you look at your list and just don't overthink it because you got to be moving. Just pick one, and it doesn't matter if it happens too many times. It's like no player in the history of games has ever said, "Oh, +1 again." I don't. All right, I guess. But just provide that benefit from your list, and try and change it up, but keep it within the story. So the answer is to front load your prep and think about it beforehand, and just again brainstorm. Think of all the good things that could possibly happen in or out of combat, because
Right.
they're going to be succeeding at cost or failing with
Flourish or whatever,
flourish.
Yeah.
On other kinds of roles, piloting or whatever else. So, and always, this is my gumshoe training coming out. A reward is always information. You failed, but you learned something about that guy. He
Right.
favors his left hand. He's trained on Mohilar 9. He is allergic to peanuts. Whatever it is, you've learned that about him. So next time you fight, just like in every Justice League comic ever, Green Lantern's ring actually dinged his armor on that one panel. Let's examine that panel. So information is always a reward. Fail with information if you put it in your head that way, as opposed to fail with reward. While
Right.
you died, you found $20 in your pocket is stupid, but he killed you, and you're like, oh, he used ultraviolet light. That's his power.
Right.
That's actually useful. So I would say your default for fail with flourish should be information.
And I think that atomic structure where you have a list of things that are cool and things that are a shame that you can mix and match is absolutely vital. And one of the ways that I would do it is to think about what the dice roll, especially in a rich dice game like Star Wars, for example, what do the dice actually represent? Although the player is rolling, it is not necessarily rolling whether or not the geometry of the blaster and the timing of the trigger pull was exactly right. It's also representing because it has things like something also goes wrong. It can be representing things like the stormtrooper dodges and the pipe behind him is full of coolant, and now the whole room is flooding with coolant, and that's why you succeeded because the stormtrooper's dead. But it's bad because now the room is filling with coolant,
yeah.
right? So part of it is exactly how much territory the dice cover at one time is flexible. So you can expand and contract